Well, thanks for still staying with us here on the AM show. Today, we're looking at the free SHS policy. It's been a full first cycle since its inception. Of course, it started with a lot of issues, plenty controversies. Remember, we went into the tracks as well. We want to take you back to when it started and where we are today with the students sitting beginning with this main exam today. A number of things happening today with officials in the Education Ministry and the Ghana Education Service going around to inspect the ongoing exams, the WASSCE. There's the integrated science paper that was leaked, but that was quickly debunked by officials. Why coming out to say that that was fake? We've had the CID and the BNI all looking into this matter of the fake leaked paper. So as the first students of the free SHS sit for the exam, we're looking at the policy itself. The policy that brought with its free package tuition, no admission fees, no library fees, no science center fees, no computer laboratory fees, no examination fees, and no utility fees. In addition, the beneficiaries also receive free textbooks, free boarding, and free meals, while day students also get a meal at school for free. Well, there are a number of people who have done some work in this policy, this area of looking at this whole free SHS policy. We'll be talking to them about it. We also have a conversation with the Ghana Education Service Director General, Professor Kwesi Opoku-Amankwa, who will be telling us about where we are as well. He's also done some write-ups on the free SHS, which has been published in the Daily Graphic newspaper. So we will run by him a few of the things and also get clarification in terms of the number sitting for the exam today and going forward. Let me quickly introduce you to two of my guests who are joining us via Zoom for this conversation. Mr. Kofi Asare is Executive Director, Africa Education Watch. Good morning to you, sir, if you can hear me. Well, we also have Mr. Clement Apak. He's an MP and member of the Education Committee of Parliament. He'll also be joining us in this assessment. Can I say good morning to you, gentlemen, if you can hear me? Okay, not quite. We would also get Professor Kwesi Opoku-Amankwa, who's Director General of the Ghana Education Service. When we do get hold of them, we will start this conversation. Stay with us. We'll be back after this. All right, thanks for staying with us here on the AM show. Let's begin our education conversation, assessing the free senior high school policy, knowing that the first full cycle of the policy, well, almost coming to an end with the students sitting for WASSCE today with the paper that, well, we thought had been leaked, but of course that's been refuted. That's the integrated science paper. Let's introduce our guests to you as we begin the conversation, and as and when we do get the Director General of the Ghana Education Service, we will rope him in the conversation, but he's written quite extensively in the Daily Graphic newspaper, well, telling us about progress of the free senior high school policy, how it all started with people doubting that this could even be possible, and how we have come very far with the policy even oversubscribed. One of the other issues has been quality, and he says a few things about it. We'll be looking at exactly what he says, but also really checking if that is still an issue. Straight on Zoom, we're joined by Kofi Asare, Executive Director, Africa Education Watch. We also have Mr. Clement Apak, who is MP and member of the Education Committee of Parliament. Good morning to you, gentlemen. Thank you for your time here on the AM show.
Hi, good morning.
Good morning to you as well. I'm actually the Deputy Ranking Member on the Committee of Education.
Great. Good to have the two of you. I want to start with Mr. Kofi Asare because you did some work a year and a half into this whole policy, assessing it. We've come to a full cycle now. There are celebrations, if you like, from this government, the Education Ministry with the Director General talking about it and saying, for instance, that the quality conversation is a myth. He writes extensively on it in the Daily Graphic newspaper of today. So let's talk about your findings following the free senior high school policy. Where are we? Where have we come from?
Well, let me begin by saying that, policy proposals by political parties should never be politicized in this country. Anytime a political party makes a proposal on a social policy especially, it must be critically reviewed without necessarily downplaying whether or not the policy can be implemented. Sometimes it leads to the loss of confidence and also loss of public interest in the policy. And this is how come the free senior school policy has come or has become a very, very, very politically charged topic. Ordinarily it should have been a popular policy aimed at ensuring that the poor and economically vulnerable who otherwise were struggling to pay their fees would now have access to free education. But the political antecedents to it is what has made it an unfortunate political issue, which may be viewed with other lenses than the educational lenses. Now, let me go to the policy itself. The policy, I am a firm believer in universal secondary education, and I believe that for African countries to be to develop to the level of those in South America and then in Western Europe, we need to have a system of education that ensures that the least qualified person on the street has an education to the level of secondary education. And so ensuring that every child in Ghana would have access to secondary education, which is universal secondary education, is the right way to go. It ensures that before anyone drops out of school, at least that person has some appreciable level of cognitive development, and then some appreciable level of critical thinking skills, problem-solving skills that the person can use to enter the world of work, either to learn a trade or to start working. And so it is very, very important that at a point, our constitution envisages that we must progressively ensure that every child has access to secondary education. And the time to ensure that everyone has access to that secondary education is now, because we've been doing this constitution business for about 25 years now. The policy has had its own challenges, we admit, because every policy in the education sector will definitely have challenges. You are working with human beings, working in Africa, within a continent and a country of resource constraints, issues relating to practices that inhibit access and participation. So there are a lot of challenges with the program. But between the time it started and today, 3 years from now, I can say that the government has done a yeoman's job in managing the program within the constraints of resources, within the constraints of varying public perceptions and within the constraints of our limited educational infrastructure. It's more or less doing something out of what some people or many people felt was impossible. And so on the scale of doing something, instead of looking on helplessly and watching students struggle to enter school, if within 3 years we've been able to enroll up to 1.2 million children, prior to 2017, there were about 880,000 children in secondary schools. It was less than 900,000. If today we have 1.2 million children enrolled, it means that we've been able to add about 300,000 to that stock. That is no mean feat, irrespective of the quality deficits. And given the resource constraints, as I mentioned, given the infrastructure constraints, given the political mistrust, and then the varying public perspectives of whether it was possible or it wasn't going to be possible, I think the government has proven a lot of people, not wrong per se, but proven to them that with very, very limited constraints, we can still achieve something for our children.
Okay, so just before I go to Mr. Clement Apaka, I just want to ask you on the quality issue. Is the quality issue a myth, as the Director General says in his write-up in the Graphic today? Because we were all talking quality, we were worried.
Well, first of all, good morning to you, and good morning to my compatriot on the other side. I'm hoping the director will join us. And good morning to viewers. I have not had a chance to see the write-up you are referring to by the Director General of the Ghana Education Service. But I'm sure that before midday, I would have had time to look at it and to digest it properly. But I will go by the conversation so far and the questions you have posed. Yes, we have every reason to worry about quality. And although the Director General may have written, I believe, eloquently to eulogize and then justify the job that he has been given as part of an effort to implement this policy, we still must take what he has put out with a grain of salt. I say so because it will be very difficult for the rest of us to properly assess quality because we don't have all the information, we don't have all the indices. But be as it may, when we raised, and many Ghanaian parents and persons in the educational sector raised concern about quality, it was not in the context that was meant to, if you like, attack government. It was based on reality. It was not just mere political propaganda. We all know that when it comes to effective teaching and learning, there are certain parameters and expectations that we know when those are in play and in place, it enhances effective teaching and learning. So we cannot downplay the impact of classroom sizes, for example, the impact of the availability of space in terms of dining halls, the impact in the availability of libraries, the impact in the availability of furniture, and even more importantly, the role of the teachers. But we all know that in the wake of the implementation of this program, there were deficits in all of the areas that I have mentioned. The issue of overcrowding in classrooms, which then led to the introduction of the double-track system and the introduction of the semester system that allowed students to stay away from school for several months than usual. The fact that many teachers were overburdened because of an increased workload. They didn't even have the chance to take a breath before another truck had to come to campus. And in fact, if we have to sum it up, we can speak about the government through GES procuring past questions and answers for the students and their instructors. All of those presupposes that government itself was very worried because they knew that the conditions that prevailed were not optimum to prepare the students traditionally the way we have all come to know. And therefore, government through the GES saw it fit to try and go a further step, unprecedented as it might be, that government itself then went out and arranged to procure past questions and examiners' reports to assist these students. So on the issue of quality, I think it is something that is still hanging. And I don't have any reason to swallow hook, line, and sinker what the GES Director General says. As the saying goes, the sweetness of the pudding is in the eating. So we wait to see what is going to happen. But you see, there's another point that I wanted to add. My good brother made mention of one or two issues that he believes government has done a lot to address. And he mentioned the issue of resources. As a member of parliament, I can tell you that in the wake of the presentation of the media budget, we now know that the total amount that government has expended on this program is 3.2 billion Ghana cedis, 3.2 billion Ghana cedis. But I know that cumulatively, from when the program started initially, 2017, although it is only the current batch of students who are enjoying the full complement till date, Parliament has voted 5.2 billion Ghana cedis in support of this program. And it is important to clarify that the funding for the free senior high school is exclusive of the total budget of the Ministry of Education. So if we provided 5.2 billion Ghana cedis just for the free senior high school to address the challenges and to ensure its proper implementation in a way that would inure to the benefit of Ghanaians, and government didn't use all of that, then on what basis can anyone claim that resources were unavailable? And if I may quickly add, government had also announced that it was constructing initially some 804 infrastructural projects to ease the burden as part of the effort to get rid of the obnoxious double track system. In fact, the board chair of the GES had indicated that before September 2019, at least 350 schools were going to be weaned off the free senior high school double track system. As we speak now, we don't know, even before the advent of COVID-19, we don't know whether indeed those 350 senior high schools have been weaned off and how many schools still remain to be weaned off. So all of these are questions that I believe need to be clarified.
Okay. Ms. Asari, let me give you the opportunity and also let you talk about the quality issue.
Yeah, I mentioned that there are quality issues with the program, and quality issues can only be fixed if the GES admits that there are quality issues. The GES and the Ministry of Education have always taken a defensive stance whenever CSOs like mine raise issues relating to quality. And I don't regret them because of the politically charged nature of such a program. But that will always never deter us from raising the quality issues. The first issue has to do with the quality of financing. What is happening is that the free senior high school is currently running heavily on loans. We had to procure a 1.5 billion GET fund securitized loan. We securitized part of the GET fund to raise this loan for the next 15 years, okay, repayable in the next 15 years, to finance mainly free senior high school infrastructure expansion to increase access. Now, what is happening is that because of the loans that we are running the program on, you have a situation where we are depleting the stock of GET fund available annually. Last year, for instance, almost about 40% of the GET fund went into the payment of loans. This year's allocation, same, about 40% of the fund went into the servicing of loans, which meant that very little or less than 1 billion was available for disbursement to institutions. This has created a problem. Apart from that, we have a situation where the heavy cost of the free senior high school policy has crowded basic education from the education financing ecosystem. And so we are now spending more money on secondary education than basic education. What is quite worrying is that 10 years ago, we were contributing about 35% of the budget to basic education. Today, we are doing something less than 20%. And my worry is this: the basic education system is supposed to be the foundation of whatever must feed into the senior high school. And so we currently, with the prevailing 70% of Ghanaian children not being able to read and write in English nationally, and with only about 2% being able to do so in districts like Yendi and others. When you see resources being stifled for basic in support of secondary education, you worry, because one of the key causes of the poor learning outcomes in basic schools is the lack of adequate investments in teaching and learning in basic schools. And so we are at a point where we need to begin to think whether we want to trade off quality at the basic level for quantity at the senior high school level. And that is where the marriage between the cost efficiency, or the need for cost efficiency at the senior high school level versus the need for more investment at the basic level will have to be made. Let me give you an example. In the past 1 month alone, government has spent about 150 million Ghana cedis on expenses that were not budgeted. I don't want to say they were COVID related or COVID occasion, because some of them could have been managed properly. We seem to be on a spending spree on anything free senior high school, and meanwhile find difficulty in raising funding for investment in basic schools. We just procured about 75 million Ghana cedis worth of calculators for students in final year to write
mathematical sets.
Mathematical sets. Okay. Now, no country is doing this. Sierra Leone is not doing this. Liberia is not doing this. Nigeria is not doing this. We have chosen, and it wasn't part of our plan. It wasn't part of the budget that went to the Parliament for approval last year, November. It wasn't part of our plan. It's just an emerging expenditure. How do you run such an expenditure on the scale of economic efficiency, on the scale of spending efficiency, and on the scale of allocative efficiency? Already, our spending and allocative efficiency is less than 48%, one of the lowest in the world. Africa, including Ghana, is a continent that commits the second highest resources to education as a percentage of GDP. But when it comes to spending efficiency, we are the last on the scale. We score less than 50, and we are 20 percentage points behind the last but one continent. And so when you spend such amount of money on calculators, and then you pay WASSCE registration fees, something that parents should be able to participate and contribute, because you are clothing the child, you are feeding the child, you are housing the child, you are giving the child books free, you are giving everything free to the child, including even past questions. So if parents want to contribute, or parents are allowed to participate by just paying between 300 cedis and 400 cedis of examination registration fees, wouldn't it be the only, at least, significant contribution a parent should make? Because the parent must be a contributor to the education development process of the child. And so when we spend this way on the free senior high school policy, then we deny basic education of critical investment that they were due previously, or they are due now, to ensure that the quality of basic education improves. And so that is the challenge we are facing now, basic versus secondary.
Okay. And I'm not sure, if, Dr. Park, if you've heard the president's given the hints that the free education is going to be extended to tertiary institutions as well. I wonder, objectively though, because you said on the education committee, if this has been such a success, even with the funding issue that we're talking about, that Mr. Asari hinted, talked about extensively, if this has been such a success that we can now begin to talk extending it to tertiary institutions?
Well, I have heard that, but you must also remember that this is a political year, and we are warming up towards election 2020.
But isn't it the same when the president talked about the free senior high school? Some people were doubting, but it became a policy that was implemented.
Well, he is not the only one who has hinted as such. So let's see, when the manifestos of the different parties are put out, then we can debate the content. But everyone is allowed to make proposals and to say things that they intend to do. But you see, it is important that I re-emphasize some of the issues raised by my colleague. He raises some very important matters that I believe should occupy the attention of Ghanaians, and I have a few more to add. You may be aware that even in the current manner in which the program has been implemented, although it is said to be free, it is the case that government or the state does not provide core textbooks to the students. In fact, rather it is elective textbooks to the students. Government only provides core textbooks. And even in the provision of those core textbooks, what happens is that when you are in year 1 and you are going to year 2, you have to leave the core textbooks of year 1 behind. But at the end of the day, when you are to prepare and to be examined, it is the expectations that your revision would cover from year 1 to year 3. That in itself presents the problem. The students, as they are starting to write their papers today, are also expected to pass elective subjects. Yet, the state or government has not made provision to include the cost of those elective textbooks in the arrangement that presents this program as free. Very quickly, with regards to Get Fund, we all know the reasons why Get Fund was set up. And we shouldn't be holding brief for government. Where there are shortfalls, we ought to point those out to government. Because if proper planning, proper arrangement, and proper expenditures had been undertaken, I believe that some of the infrastructural deficits that we believe is impacting on the proper implementation of the program in a way that would inure to the students first and foremost, and to the rest of us as Ghanaians and as a nation would have been addressed. So even if government chose to procure masks, government had said earlier on that through the board chair of GES, that they were going to take about some 350 senior high schools off the double track system by building the structures that were announced, 804, and in the 2020 budget, it was said that the number had increased in terms of the structures to 962. To think that in 2020, only last month, I filed a question in Parliament, and the response from the minister was that only 266 or so structures had been completed. Raises a lot of questions. But remember that I indicated that the amount that Parliament has voted in support of the program is above and beyond the amount that the Minister for Finance indicated was expended. So what has happened to the 2 billion, as far as my calculation is concerned, that was approved for use in support of the program? Couldn't these monies have been applied towards addressing some of the challenges that many of us have been speaking to? But you see, Mama V, there is a very important point that many of us are forgetting. One of the cardinal reasons why this policy was introduced was to ensure that every student of school-going age who completes junior high school gains access to senior high school. And that is why, if you look at the way the program has been implemented, there has not been a cutoff point or a threshold. But if you look at the figures of students who wrote the BECE, in 2017 and have now reached the point of writing WASSCE in 2020, that total number of students was 468,060. 468,060. If you go by the president's announcement of government taking the examination fees of students who were slated to be writing WASSCE in 2020, he said that 313,873 students were going to be writing WASSCE this year, and government was going to bear the cost of their examination fee to the tune of 74 million Ghana cedis. Well, later on, Wayi came to say that in actual fact, the president got it wrong, and that the total number of students who were to write WASSCE this year was 375,737. Give or take. If we go by the president's figures, that would mean that in excess of 114,000 students who completed basic education, wrote BECE, are currently not writing WASSCE. if we go by the figures presented by WAEC, it would mean that some 92,323 students who should have been writing WASSCE with their colleagues as they all transitioned from BECE are not writing. So if the program was supposed to ensure that the most important barrier, as this government put it, making it difficult for students to access secondary education was cost, and therefore the cost has been taken, including examination fees. What then is the reason for the certain disappearance of some 92,000 students between?
Let me run that by Mr. Sari to see if there's a way to consolidate these numbers. Mr. Sari?
I mentioned earlier that obviously every policy will have challenges. The rollout of this program had initial challenges. In the year one, for instance, because of the limited infrastructural capacity, about 20% of those who were placed were not able to actually enroll. And so if you look at the first year's data, percentage placed and percentage enrolled, there was a 20% gap. But if you look at last year's data, last 2019-2020 academic year data, percentage placed and percentage enrolled, the difference was only 10%. It's reducing. It meant that the first batch in year one, 20% of those who were placed could not enroll due to the limited vacancies we all alluded to, which occasioned the rollout of the double track. And also the number you are referring to from WAEC obviously excludes students who are doing secondary and technical courses. I mean, secondary technical courses.
Yeah, but how could the president get that wrong if they're all beneficiaries of the same policy?
No, they are not beneficiaries of the same policy. The president mentioned students who have registered for WAEC. If you are a secondary technical student and you are doing woodwork or you are doing catering, you don't write WAEC. You write an examination under NAPTEX. So the president couldn't have announced the payment of your WAEC fees. You don't write a WAEC examination. So he was referring to the percentage of students in the senior high school system who write WAEC, not NAPTEX. But the point I wanted to make was that, yes, the policy sought to ensure that everybody who goes to BECE is able to transit to senior high school one without being inhibited by cost considerations.
Okay, so just a little clarification. So we have the number
9 in maths or English. Even currently, if you have a fail at 9 in maths or English, any of them, you cannot be placed by the computer. These are things we are advocating must be removed. Because if you are talking universal secondary education, it means that Kofi Asare must go to secondary school on the basis of rights, not on the basis of his ability to pass maths or English. And so as we expand the program beyond politics and situate it within the SDG 4 and Ghana's education strategic plan, and begin to appreciate that it is important for the basic human capital in this country to be the senior high school level, we will get to the point where, and we have already gotten to the point, where no one should be excluded by basis of the results they attained at the basic school level.
Then why do we write BECE then?
That's why we have called for the scrapping of the BECE. We don't expect the BECE to travel to next year, because the BECE is now a useless examination. The only purpose of the BECE is just to place students, to determine who goes to pre-sec or who goes to secondary school. That's all. That's the only thing the BECE does today, to determine who goes to a grade A school and who goes to a grade B or grade C school. The BECE is not what it's used to do. It's not used to do any other thing apart from that. And so once we develop a continuous assessment system which has credibility, there won't be the need to undertake a BECE again. Don't forget that under the new curriculum arrangement, we have 4 standardized tests. From class 2, there's the first one, class 4, the second one, class 6, the third one, and then JSS 2, the fourth one. So there are 4 standardized curriculum-based tests that will be undertaken across the country for every student as a way of gauging the academic attainment levels of students. And also because the curriculum we are using now is now standard-based, you want to know the attainment of the various standards, okay, by the children. It will help us in reinforming policy and all administrative actions. It's good. Yeah. But because the children will be writing an examination every other year, 2 years from class 2, class 4, class 6, JSS 2, it will amount to examination fatigue for you to assess the student in JSS2 and also let them write another national exams in JSS3. And so stakeholders appreciate that the BEC is no more relevant in this sense. Once we have a system, a continuous assessment system to determine who should go to Presec or who should go to Chobodon Secondary School, we don't need any BEC. Don't forget that BEC is only a Ghanaian examination. It is not done in Nigeria. It's not done in Sierra Leone, not done in Liberia, not done in Gambia. It's only a Ghanaian thing. And so we expect that the BEC should be faced out very soon. But let me quickly say that moving forward, it's important for us to move beyond the policy of the free senior high school and situate it properly within national context. Let's appreciate that the management framework currently running at the GAS for the free senior high school is not sustainable. The free senior high school is running on a political system, a politically set up system at the Ministry of Education, which is called the Free Senior Secretariat. Everyone there is appointed politically, and most of them are political actors. Okay, and so it blurs accountability. The secondary education division of GES is an entire division. It has been sitting there doing virtually nothing when it comes to the free senior high school. And so we need to gradually migrate the management framework of the GES and situate it within the bureaucracy, the public service proper, and divorce party people from the management of the senior high school and give it to the GES proper to do their public service work. That will ensure that there's greater accountability and also greater acceptance of criticism, and also a more professional approach towards managing a program. At least it's gone 3 years, and so we can say that if the partisan interests were brought on to ensure that the thing is cooked, fine, it's already cooked. Let's migrate it to the GES system, because that's why we are paying over 500 teachers to do so. The second issue is that let's begin to be expedient in the financing of the free senior high school policy. Without spending efficiency, you cannot implement any policy efficiently. And so let's begin to divorce political consideration and political interest from the finance of the free senior high school policy. The free senior high school policy must be managed like any other public policy. We must be mindful of the way we spend money on that policy. The blank check approach in managing the free senior high school policy is not the way forward, because it is hurting basic education, resources for basic education. And then finally, you see, we need to begin to appreciate that the current 70-30-day boarding system is financially unsustainable. Our secondary education system is the most expensive in Africa. Everybody wants to be a boarder. We have compounded this by providing food for even day students under the free senior high school policy. We are spending over 10 million on food every year for just day students. Now, we need to begin to appreciate that even in the pandemic era, we have reopened a lot of junior high schools, about 15,000 of them, more than the 800 senior high schools reopened. But you can hardly hear of COVID infections in junior high schools because they are there. And we are hearing many infections in boarding schools. It tells you that within the COVID and also within the parameters of spending and allocative efficiency, it is wise policy-wise to expand access to free senior high school along the community day concept, such that government spends less than 1 cedi a day on a senior high school student instead of spending about 6 cedis a day on the same. Until we begin to deboardinize our approach to secondary education by focusing more on expanding access along the line of day students, day schools education, it will be difficult for us to make the free senior high school financially sustainable. And when you fail in doing so, you will keep depriving basic education of the much needed resources that they require to improve the quality, to produce the input for secondary education. Very
excellent points you make there. Dr. Park, I'd like to run the recommendations by you. What do you make of these very important recommendations that Mr. Asari makes going forward if we want to really sustain this policy? And also the comments about the BEC not being useful anymore.
Well, he is a non-political actor. So obviously, we political actors, and particularly on my divide, we always factor in their contribution and their suggestions. So if they are making this proposal, I think that it is worthy of our attention for consideration. But be as it may, you know, the large chunk of his complaint, if you like, has been about political actors and how this policy has been politicized. Well, rightly so. I mean, if you have the president referring to candidates writing this year as Akufo-Addo graduates, obviously that is political. And so, you know, we all have some cross to bear or some blame to carry as political actors. But we do agree that one of the sectors of our society, or if you like, our economy, that needs to be divorced from politics ought to be education, and I would actually include healthcare provision. So let's see the way it plays out. But I think that the suggestions that he is putting forward clearly want our attention. But the last point I wish to make is the issue of funding that he raised. I believe very strongly that we ought to get the Auditor General to conduct a special audit regarding the funding of the free senior high school policy.
What's your suspicion?
A lot of things that have been done that many of us, even members of the Education Committee, get to hear after the fact. And as he rightly alluded to with regards to this procurement of mathematical sets, that was not even part of the program. We had not thought of it. It was not inclusive in the funding that Parliament had approved exclusively for the implementation of the program. And as I indicated earlier on, for the past 3 years, now 4 years that the program has been in existence, in excess of 5 billion. And we don't also know whether this was being drawn from the funding for the Ministry of Education, which was also in excess of 11 billion. So you have some of these issues coming up, these expenditures, and the political actors are running the show. As he said, the Free Senior High School Secretariat is dominated by political elements and appointees, and a lot of us are left in the dark, even members of the committee. You won't believe it, but most of the time we get to hear things at the same time that the rest of the public gets to know. So there's also the need for transparency, for accountability, for all of us to move along in unison to ensure that the program bears the needed benefit that we all desire. With regards to the facing off of the BEC, we will see how it plays out, because if indeed we are going to go by the new curriculum that he eloquently narrated, 4 exams, primary 2, primary 4, primary 6, JHS 2, then truly what would be the justification to ask the students to write another exam only a year after? So let's see how it is going to go. But as the political season is heating up, I can assure you that we'll be hearing our proposal as we see it in terms of the educational sector, in terms of what we believe we have to do to address the challenges which are preventing Ghanaians and Ghanaian students to enjoy the full complement of the free senior high school. And we have said, unlike this government, which has not been able to tell us when the double track system is going to be phased out, and I hear the president said somewhere that 2024 or thereabout, we have said that if Ghanaians give us the mandate, within 1 year, we will be able to bring the double track system to an end.
Okay, we'll wait for your manifesto and your policy specifically on education, and we will digest it and ask the necessary questions. Just before we wrap up, and I don't have a lot of time, this batch of free senior high school students, as we've been talking about, they are beginning the exam, the one that really counts today. With all the talks, with all the hype, the attention, there's a lot of focus on them. And I wonder, Ms. Asari, if you can answer this, will the outcome of the exam be so meaningful? I mean, with all the attention that we're giving to them, with all the pressure?
Well, yeah, it is heartwarming that the first batch is finally starting their main examination today. And we've already wished them well at the beginning of the examination last week. But let me say this, that the concentration of attention on the outcomes of this examination is unnecessary. it only makes political sense, but it doesn't make any policy sense or technical sense, in the sense that the grading system WAEC uses is not the type that you can compare over time. They use the norm reference test, an NRT, the norm reference system. And so that system simply, among others, uses the person with the highest score to begin the grading. If I had 80 in maths last year, and I was the highest then, I would be the benchmark for A. And so if this year you had the same 70, but you were not the highest, someone had 90, and the same 70 would be C. And so under the NRT, one disadvantage of that particular scoring system is that it doesn't permit the cross comparison of scores across the periods. Apart from that, examinations come with different stress levels also. And so definitely, if you are into assessment, you would know that any attempt to compare performance of students across years using WASSCE or BCA it's not a credible exercise. It is not what any education researcher would do, because it has no basis.
All right. Apologies. I'll give the opportunity to land, but we've been joined by Professor Opoku-Amankwa, who is the Director General of the Ghana Education Service. Of course, we've been referring to his write-up in the graphic today. Good morning to you, Prof. I don't know how much of this conversation you've heard.
Good morning. Sorry for, I believe you've been calling, but I'm in my home village, and this morning I've decided to go around some of the schools in the area, Wenchi, Takrasi, Ede, Assume, as the children write the exams. So I was just getting ready. I only heard about the non-reference test. And if I can make a comment on that, I hope whoever was speaking was referring to a non-reference text in relation to the BECE.
So the person you heard, Kofi Asari, Executive Director, Africa Education Watch.
I regard and good morning to him. So I believe he was referring to the non-reference text in relation to the BECE, which is true. But as far as WASSCE is concerned, they use the criterion reference test. So for the criterion, when A is set, if they decide that A is 70, everything about A is 70. If they decide that A is 80, everything about everything about 80 is 8. It is the BEC that they use the non-reference, but this one they use the criterion reference. And that's one you can always compare across cohorts.
Okay.
1992 people, 2002 people, whatever, and then you can also always compare across countries, and that's how come for every year when that result is released, we are able to determine which student was first in Ghana, which student was first across the countries, and then we do special excellence awards for them.
Okay, but we were also talking about the concentration on this batch. We know that this is the first full circle. This is the first really free senior high school students who are writing the exam. But the attention that we're giving them is unnecessary.
The attention.
The focus.
Oh, okay.
And the reference, reference also as Kufuado, you know, the president's name is even on them as students.
Well, I believe what the president said was not that he was referring to them as Kufuado, but he said that is what people are saying. So, and then he wholeheartedly accepts that. Why wouldn't he? For the kind of investment that he made in them, obviously he will accept that. So he didn't say that he is calling them, what do you call it, Kufuado. But I think the concentration on them, one way or the other, we may have to accept it, because this is the first time that we are doing this kind of thing in our country. And once it is coming in that direction, you expect it. Again, it's also something that is a flagship program of a government. So obviously, there's so much attention and concentration on that. But I believe even the children themselves, I'm not sure they have bought into this kind of concentration. A large majority of them, when you go around, they are seriously learning to make sure that they get a future. So it's probably hard, and those of us who that we can get some advantage out of it in one way or the other, who tend to be doing so much on it. But for example, if the concentration about doing a supplement on them, it's one of the things that we may want to discuss. Yes, we needed to let people know how far we've gone with it. It's a whole new thing to us, and it's something that we need to bring down. And then, usually when the challenges come, we get to hear of them, but we don't seem to be celebrating the good side of it. We celebrate the good side of it. The issue, the areas where we think we still need to improve on, for the betterment of education in Ghana.
Well, Prof, I really wish you had joined us earlier, because a lot of recommendations and suggestions have come through from my guests. I can't possibly run all of them by you right now and take your reaction, but I'll note them down. Hopefully you can give us the opportunity to have a sit-down conversation and we can get your reaction.
The good thing about Kofi is that everything that you send out there, before you get it, I get it first. So it's something that, and I always, sending education is dear to him, just as it's dear to us and to a lot of people. So almost everything that he sends out to you, one of the first people who get it is me. And occasionally we will have one or two conversations around it. So, we are all in it together, and we are all working to it. That's what I think. Right? Yeah.
Okay. All right, Prof. We'll have a detailed conversation with you when you return from your monitoring of this examination. That's the Director General of the Ghana Education Service. So unfortunately, we can have a longer conversation with him because of time. And my guests, apologies, we have to end it here. Just to Dr. Pak, can you hear me? Yes, Dr. Pak, I'll just give you, the two of you, a minute. Please manage a minute for me so we can wrap this up.
Well, what I would say is that education continues to be a very important sector, and we ought to do our best to ensure that we provide the needed skills, knowledge, and talent for those who are to man the affairs of this nation. And we should do well to depoliticize it, as Mr. Asare has suggested. And we still maintain that we will be able to get rid of the double track system in 1 year, not 2024, as the president has announced.
Thank you very much, Dr. Pak. Mr. Asare?
Well, we conclude by saying that a policy that has, within 3 years, increased access to secondary school by about 300,000 certainly cannot be a bad policy. It's a very good policy, one of the best we've seen in this country. And as the policy grows good and bigger, definitely there will be quality challenges because the quantity will increase. And so discussions around the quality of the free senior school policy should be taken in good faith and in proper context. We are wishing the students the best of luck, and we are endearing the political parties to back off commentary around the student performance and the comparisons, because it makes the students even nervy. We shouldn't be engaged in comparing the performance of students over time. It has no basis in education policy, so far as I'm concerned. Examinations have different stress levels, and you cannot compare yesterday's master paper to today's master paper. And so let's leave the politics out of the performance of the children, and let's leave the children to write the examination and pass well and move ahead of their lives.
Great. Well, thank you very much. I'll come back to you, Mr. Asare, when the NDC is out with their own policy, and then we will talk about it. I'm grateful for your time. He's the Executive Director, Africa Education Watch. Also on the show, MP for Busa South in the Upper East region, and Deputy Ranking Member on the Education Committee, Dr. Clement Apak. Thank you, gentlemen. All right.